Hey, welcome back to chapter 20 of the abridged version of the Golden Bough. I'm Luke. This is Ostic and Jordan going from top to down. Hey guys, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
So, yeah. So, chapter 20, we're going to be talking about tabooed persons, specifically all six sections. If I can zoom in on it there for a second, we're going to be talking about chiefs and kings tabooed, mourners tabooed, women tabooed at menstruation and childbirth, warriors tabooed, manslayers tabooed, and hunters and fishers tabooed. I think it was a pretty interesting chapter, and we cover a lot of ground here. But I think the reason why it was interesting for me is that it offered potentially an insight into what we kind of just lived through in 2020 with the COVID epidemic. I need to figure out how I want to talk about this because I'm not really trying to do some sort of wild like expose or something like that. But I think there's a lot to be learned from it. And that's why I have some images here in the bottom left-hand corner. You see above the link, we see a man who has painted his face white and has a skull above it. It's from an article talking about psychogenic and voodoo death, which I really didn't have these words in my vocabulary. But as I went through all these different sections in the Golden Bough, I thought it and I don't know how it struck you guys, and we'll talk a little bit about it more in the next slide, but these taboos, when they are transgressed, really, it's not just like a silly thing that people have. It's not like when like children say, step on a crack, you break your mother's back or something like that, and your mother's back really does break. The people believe so strongly in these taboos, it can actually sicken them and kill them because the power of their belief is so strong. And I hadn't really thought about that. I had thought about the taboos that were in place, but it makes sense. Like, how did these things endure in these primitive cultures if people really didn't see some sort of cause and effect nexus going on? So I think it's worth thinking about that in regards to 2020. And that's why I have an article here that I've included in the title card. The man that came up with this title, Voodoo Death or Psychogenic Death, is named Walter B. Cannon. And this is his article from the American Anthropologist that he published in 1942, where he detailed the exact same things that Frazer was talking about. But I think this was widely known. This is just really the first attempt to codify it into the literature and to develop a mechanism for it. But that's not all we're going to be talking about, and I don't want to talk about too much. We're also going to be talking about the royal touch phenomenon that came up in previous broadcasts, where this idea of there being sort of a living psychic power or life force that was going through the leaders of these primitive tribes. Like, this was still an idea that was going on in modern Europe up until I think the 19th century in some cases. And I've got an image. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And I'll save the real schizo things for the end, where it's appropriate to talk about these things. I want to get in the habit of possibly discerning and wringing out the esoteric meaning of these moon landing maps. We're going to look a little bit at the Apollo 11 landing today, what craters it landed near, where it landed in the Sea of Tranquility, why these things were chosen, to perhaps see if there's something that the universe is communicating to us through this world historical event. Also wanted to look a little bit deeper at the Gemini symbolism and perhaps connect it to our discussion on the numinosity of the number 11. And I wanted to revisit, perhaps with a new layer, this synchronistic event that happened on the 25th anniversary of the moon landing, where the Levy-Shoemaker 9 comet smashed into Jupiter. So I think those will generally preoccupy us. I want to say, as I kind of develop my larger theory, everything that I put forward here is incredibly provisional and wrong on occasion. So really, vet everything I say and feel free to push back. But I think I kind of have come up with a better understanding of the way the picture I have of how it's all sort of working in terms of the layers of interpretation, and not that they're just layers to be transcended and gone through. It might be possible to think about them being in some sort of dialectical union, and this has shades of Hegel in it, and which is interesting because there have been people who have tried to unite Hegel and Jung despite the protestations of Jung. So those are roughly the topics I want to talk about today, and I'll hand the microphone over to the guests before we get into the material.
I'm really excited to talk about it because a lot of topics like warriors tabooed and like women being tabooed at menstruation and childbirth, they're pretty interesting and they still go on these days. Like we can still find examples, living examples. So I'm pretty excited to talk about them as we approach them. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. There's so many different examples. I think I did not exhaust. It's kind of low hanging fruit to talk about it in relation to what happened in 2020. But there's going to be a million different other ways that this is applicable. I mean, we've talked about this in a variety of different other contexts, that there's so many different taboos in our society that we don't even know where they came from. So let's see if we can suss some of those out. Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it. I think the second half of the presentation will be super juicy as we kind of
Oh yeah.
decode real life events that have supposedly happened.
Yep.
And regardless if they did or did not, it's super fascinating to me. And I love the example you brought up, Ostic, of childbirth. I think, 2020 is one example, but when we talk about this conceptually, like it really is applicable anytime, anywhere. I think just today, Luke, your sister was talking about kind of like the season being the time people get kind of sick and run down. So, how much of this is just kind of shared beliefs? So excited to get deeper into that.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, it raises it. I think it does require a complete um, revisiting of like the mechanisms for what make us ill. Perhaps it's not just one disease where this psychogenic effect is going on. Perhaps there could be many others, things like unlimited sorts of things, right? Um, Probably maybe a lot of psychological diseases, how we approach mental health. Uh,
Economics.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure it's all. Yeah, if you want to talk about diseased economies, that could be applicable to this as well. So let's go to the next slide and kind of get into it. Um, so this is the aforementioned Walter Bradford Cannon, who came up with the voodoo death theory or proposition back in 1942. And I think a lot of people, when talking about the events of 2020, are kind of there's a lot of people that are kind of dismissive and say like, oh, this is like media driven or something like that. I will say, what do I want to say about this? I want to say that in my personal experience, and I really don't want to relitigate or rehash all of those events. I think I do want to. I think it's appropriate for us to have conversations about this. That the individuals that were most trusting of whatever was coming across official channels seemed to be the individuals most afflicted by this disease. In my own personal experience, maybe the two of you have different experiences. When this was going on, I was the only people that I had any sort of like real enduring sort of interaction with were people that did not watch television and had a general distrust of all centralized information, and none of us got sick. And that's what I know. That's what I can tell you from my own personal experience. This is not some sort of major scientific finding. So when you have something as anomalous as that, it raises the question of something about what's going on in as detailed in these different transgressions of taboos could really be happening within our modern science. And there's an article that perhaps really didn't get a lot of attention here. That's not to say that these things are fake and not real and that people didn't suffer or something like that. But it does argue that we do need to take into consideration the role of psychology in pandemics. And this is a great little paper that I found called "What is the Mind, or Where is the Mind in COVID-19 Causality?" I strongly recommend everybody taking a look at this. I believe it came out in 2022. And the author was pretty much just arguing like, look, there is we're just treating the body. We're not really treating the psychological aspects of this that could be a major driver of it. We don't even really know because we're not even open to the possibility that it's playing a role. It seems like a pretty reasonable. Now that me saying that, I don't know if that comes off as like extremist or something. I'm not sure, but that seems like a pretty measured stance. And this guy, Walter Bradford Cannon, when he was looking at all these different taboo transgressions and people who are really dying from them, these were some of the pathways that he understood for why this was happening. Like why were people dying because they ate a food scrap off somebody else's plate that they ought not to have? Or why were people dying because they did this thing? In our culture, that would never happen. It would never occur to us that eating a piece of bread off somebody's plate would ultimately make us sick and die, unless we believe that we're catching a germ or something like that. But they have no concept of germs. Um, and what he kind of came up with, from what I understand, I've not gone too deep into this, is that because there is so much fear and anxiety around breaking these taboos, it really induces a situation where a tremendous amount of adrenaline and cortisol surge within the individual. And then it gets compounded because the whole society is believing in these taboos as well. When those things are surging and suppressing the immune system, that there's a type of social ostracism that goes along with it, right? And this may ultimately um, end up suppressing one's survival instincts. It may cause depression and other issues that make it impossible to adapt and survive to whatever is going on here. And I think in our common parlance, what we talk about is that this is what is known as the nocebo effect. So all of these factors together ultimately end up causing people who are in these primitive societies to die of things that would not affect Westerners. But we are dying of things in the West. So I think we have to, be objective here and ask ourselves: is our society really driven by as much rationalistic science as we think it is, or have these taboos um, transformed in a way, and the exact same thing, the psychogenic death, is happening in many of our hospitals and in many of our communities because we are still driven by taboo that we don't understand. So that's all I want to really say about that. But I'm sure both of you have something to offer.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, Austin.
Yeah, I'll start with, I mean, that's what I feel because people, I mean, if this was not true, the psychological effects of thinking, of the mind, so why would there be so many coaches around the world that talk about positive manifestation and everything? They do this. I mean, someone must be getting positive results by practicing themselves these methods. Otherwise, they would not find any buyers for their products or anything. So because the mind actually does have a lot of power over shaping reality, and with the in the case of ostracization, as you talked about, so it creates a depression. I mean, I have seen cases of people, like old people, old couples, suddenly, if the wife dies, the husband would die like 4 hours later, like 5 days
Right.
later, something like that. So they lose, like, losing their will to live is exactly like it actually makes them shut down physically. So it's pretty interesting. I mean, even animals, like when they sense that they are near death, you know so they move
Yeah.
around, they move away from you, and then they die peacefully because they know the emotions, and what the seeing them like die would cause you. So it's like the mind is very aware. If the mind decides to, I need to end it right here, I cannot like take it anymore, then the body responds accordingly. The body, some people, like, this current society has a lot of enabled sort of a controlled depression. You're depressed, but you're not actually depressed. You can like substitute it with cheap other alternatives, like maybe you can buy food somewhere, you don't have to prepare it, things like that. You might be depressed on the inside, but your needs are being fulfilled. You might be getting fat, you're like, oh, whatever, I'm getting food anyways, things like that. So in the primitive society, because community was so strong, and if the community ostracized you, people talk about exile being worse than death. People,
Right.
yeah. So that's those societies, they had a very strong belief in community, and I think it must hold a lot of power in the minds of, as we evolved as people.
Well,
Now we don't
think
value it
about
as
that,
much.
right? Yeah, think about that. Like, what were the two major things that so many people were doing in 2020? They were desperately afraid to have community. So they were quarantining themselves and isolating themselves and disrupting their sense of community. And because people were working remotely and working from home, they were probably watching and imbibing so much radio and cable news that they were scaring themselves to death. I understand, like, and it's easy to get addicted to frightening material. I remember, like, when I was like waking up in 2016 and finding out about all these like scary forces in the world and stuff like that, it's easy to get hooked to it. Like, but at a certain point, you can only watch like so many like reptilian videos, right? Like, but it is like it's kind of like how people get addicted to horror movies or something like that. So you break up people's sense of community, and then they're shown these shocking images and headlines all day. Maybe what started, I'm not gonna get back into this. Maybe it was real somewhere, but at some point you have to ask yourself, does the amplification of that original story through the media waves and through isolation actually start to become the ideology of death? Does that actually start to be the thing that's killing people? And if that's the case, that's like a really scary idea, because think about how many like people participated in that, right? Like how many people in the media industry, how many people like friends and loved ones who are like kind of part of the apparatus that sowed its own destruction. Now, I want to say I am not some expert on this. I am so not. Maybe there's like a million different studies out there that say that psychogenic death and voodoo death is like complete hogwash. And so I'm
I
and
mean,
I'm open to that. But
how
it's
would you even
intuitively makes
test
sense.
it? How would you even test it? I mean, you cannot test it in a lab. You have to have a real community with real emotions to actually affect that. It's difficult to capture. You can maybe see it in your eyes, but it's something that might not lend itself to measurements that science
That's
can
true.
accept. So it's like,
Yeah, I mean, it would be pretty unethical, right? Like you devise an experiment where you like scare a person versus not scaring a person. I remember for like decades I've heard these stories about when people get sick, they always ask people to pray for them. And I believe there was some study somewhere where people in a hospital were there was a group that was not prayed for and there was a group that was prayed for. This is like kind of urban legend. I don't have it in front of me, but apparently the people that were being prayed for did were doing considerably better, and ultimately they had to stop the experiment because it was like becoming unethical because they were treating people differently. So yeah, it raises a very interesting question about what would be the experimental design for this, because it seems like you'd ultimately contribute to the early demise of the people that you were scaring, or at least not positively affirming. Jordan, I know you have a lot to say on this.
There's three things. First, I'm blanking on the book, but there's a book about basically creating groups of 8 people to do prayer. And they've done all sorts of studies and tried to measure things like crime rates and health outcomes and things like that. So I don't think it's just a one off. And intuitively, when two or more set their focused intention on things, I've seen a shift. But to Ostic's point, it's going to be very difficult to create a study within a scientific context to validate or invalidate the hypothesis of voodoo death, just by the very nature of it. The second thing is I was reminded of there's at least reports of people with multiple personality disorder. When they shift into their different personalities, they exhibit different diseases. Like, an example that was used is allergies. So when one personality was front and center, they'd be allergic to certain things, and another would be totally fine, to the point where physiologically you could see demonstrably them have an allergic reaction to something, which is fascinating. Like how the mind works with the body is wild. And the last thing I wanted to bring up, I believe the book was called Electric Rainbow, something like that, and it
Oh
was a
yeah,
very popular book
Invisible
during.
Rainbow.
That's probably
Yeah,
correct,
I
yeah.
think that's right.
It was a v Yeah, it was a very popular book throughout kind of the 2020 time as a counter explanatory explanation of why we were seeing what ugh, I'm not being articulate, but basically it was an explanation to say, "Oh, we have these plagues and things when we have more of this technology emitting these frequencies." Well, that may be true. We're looking at correlation, right? But now we're having this conversation about how the belief itself. So on the one hand, yes, it could be the actual frequency. And I could see it going two ways. Like the beliefs that we have could emit a frequency that could be contagious to those around us. Belief is infectious. But also, I wonder if just the mass media environment that we're in today allows access to way more minds to kind of insert these belief stories that then turn into these nocebos. So it could be like the EMF itself, but it also could just be the ideas being repeated over and
Yeah,
over and over on the news, on social media that are inserting themselves into our subconscious.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is called The Invisible Rainbow by
Mm.
Arthur Furstenberg. I put it in the chat if you want to pull it up. It's not super necessary.
Yeah.
Furstenberg, is he
Yeah.
related to Diane Furstenberg or someone like that?
It's a very
That
yeah, I know who
that
you're talking
socialite
about.
lady.
Yeah.
Oh,
Who
okay.
was on like the cover of Look magazine when her big hat. I know who you're talking about. I think
Okay,
actually
okay.
Betsy Von Furstenberg. That's who you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um
I
yeah, I
mean,
think there
are
was
they
one
related or no? I
yeah,
just
there was something else I wanted to say, but I think we've like pretty effectively covered it in terms of like preparing
Yeah.
people for this conversation. Hopefully we don't get flagged for misinformation for just having a
Eh.
nice
I mean,
conversation about our
it's
lives.
just one thing. Have you seen
Yeah.
the movie Eddington? I think it captures that feeling of taboos and like people enforcing these taboos quite well. Like the it's a new movie that came out
Eddington?
in July. Yeah.
Eddington? No, I have not seen it.
Yeah, you guys should check it out. It's
Oh,
a
this
good
is the one with
movie.
Robert Downey Jr., right?
No, 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 not Robert Downey
No,
Jr.
Walking
with
Phoenix. Walking
Joaquin
Phoenix.
Phoenix.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like a
I mean,
sheriff. Yeah.
it's pretty insane. Like he managed to put all of this. I mean, all those QAnon theories. He actually, I don't know if I'd be flagged for that. Please edit it out. But he put those in the movies. Actually, like a valid perspective in a sense. Like it's not
Interesting.
he's not ridiculing it or anything. It's just there. People are talking about it. It's pretty insane, and like they even talk about all those gematria dates and everything in the movie. I'm like, what the hell? It's like he's talking to us right now.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
pretty psyched when I saw this movie, and I think you
Okay,
guys would
cool.
really enjoy it. It's
I,
about the
I
COVID
automatically
thing.
I automatically assumed it had an agenda, but you're saying that it's more of a
No,
reflection, so that's interesting.
yeah, it's very interesting, and there's things like, under this guise of people getting isolated and everything, there's a new data center being built in that town, and like land is being given away. So it's like, you know when people are scared, when people are distracted, other forces are working their way in to settle their agendas. So there's
Right.
that element as well in the movie. So I think you guys would enjoy it. Most people should really enjoy it. Yeah.
Cool. Actually, I remember the point that I was going to make in terms of experimental design, and I can't remember if this was in the Canon paper and the COVID paper, I think one of the pieces of evidence that's used to establish the reality of psychogenic death or voodoo death is that when people assimilate, when they change cultures, like if they're moving from one of these more primitive cultures to like a air quotes first world culture or something like that, or a Western culture that does not have the same religious taboos, they start noticing that because the taboos aren't enforced by the community, that the transgression consequences of those taboos starts to go away. Now, that could also be explained by, well, look, they're in a first world country, they're receiving better medical care. So I'm not saying that's a clear cut argument, but I think that might be one way when you have that would be ethical is if you brought people out of one community and brought them into a Western community and they thrived, doing the exact same things that they would have died from the previous community. That might be one way to have a good experiment. But of course, there are limitations to it. I haven't thought it all the way through.
I mean, there's one other thing that, we're talking about COVID-19, but, even in family dynamics, even like I'm an older person, like I'm not a child, but still I get affected if I get talking to by my parents. So it's like, you suddenly reduced. I mean, I'm talking about the effect of the mind in the sense like it can have the power to like physically take away your strength in a way, or like make you physically weaker than you actually are, or like think about. So like mind has
Right.
a lot of power in a sense. There's a movie called Split, where it's like the Jordan talked about multiple personalities. It's, I don't know if it's based on a true research, but like different personalities have different strengths. So like if it's one personality is a child, so he has the strength of a child even though he has muscles. And if one personality is like some sort of a bodybuilder, he would have a strength of a bodybuilder suddenly. So it's interesting in that sense.
I've got a lot of movies to watch now.
I mean, that's just relevant to the discussion.
Yeah, no, it is. No. I mean, a lot of truth comes out in these movies. All right, let's get into the Golden Bough material, unless Jordan wants to say something else.
No, let's get to it.
All right. So let's see here. So the first section that we have is the chiefs and kings taboo, and we've talked about this a lot. We've spent a considerable amount of time talking about how in these communities the monarch, the king, the queen, whatever, like they are kind of this nucleus that is holding together the entire organism of the community. And so they have all these different special rules, and everything is more dramatic that they do because the fate of all the other individuals in the community is bound up with the fate of the sovereign. And from this section, I think what it's trying to communicate is that it kind of goes both ways. It's not just that all these precautions have to be taken to make sure that nothing bad happens to the sovereign, and that's why those taboos exist, but also because there is like so much like divine life force flowing through their man gods. They have to be isolated so as to not affect the other individuals in the community. It's like they have so much pure divine essence in them that the average person in that community would be just killed or blinded or sickened if they were to interact with their sovereign. So it's like a double-edged sword. And so we've got a couple of examples here, like with the Mikados, we've gone back and forth with. So one of, and we don't have to go into all of these. If someone wants to do the screenshots, of course they can. But in regards to their food, like the every time they eat, they have to eat on new clay pots and dishes, and they're broken after use because they don't want that sort of overwhelming divine energy to get passed on to somebody else in the community. It might cause them to swell up or have some sort of body pain. That's a real concern for them. And then in Fiji, they don't want people eating from the chief's food or wearing his clothes because, again, it could cause some sort of deleterious effect. Although they do have a group that is sort of acts as like an intermediary, like called the Na Nuduka Ni clan, that is kind of like a priestly class that is allowed to to handle these things so that they can get things done. If we go to slide 377, we've got the Nubas of Eastern Africa, where they have to be very careful about entering the king's house because it could be fatal, but the king can kind of like nullify it if they touch their bare shoulder. A lot of this is going on with touching, and that sets up, we can talk about more of them. I think the examples I've given are effective, and I wanted to revisit the royal touch scenario that I mentioned at the opening here. But were there any ones that you guys wanted to dwell on before I moved on? They're all very interesting. It's just, this is an index. It kind of goes on and on and on, and there are other things we're doing. Yeah, Ostic. I think you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, a lot of these deaths involves conversion. So, these deaths, they're very dramatic in nature. So what I'm
Yes.
thinking about is like what they're doing is they're choosing, a patsy, and they're creating this effect, or maybe it's an actor, he's not dying for real. So they're essentially aura farming, like they all do, all these things. But
Mm.
even if you know about this, you're like they're actually aura farming. Now we are at in a modern society, we know these things would not happen if you touch a person. Why would this happen? You do not even think about that. And so it's like we need not be told these things, to have some sort of a sane relationship with the world around us. But suddenly picture this: if you are transported in a second to meet the president of the country, what would you feel actually? Like, would you actually feel his aura? Like there some different, because it's like I'm thinking about all these bells and whistles around him, all these customs, like you have to wait 15 minutes, and okay, president will come, he'll talk, all these rituals, all these little pauses, and like people talking to you in a different manner, people walking in a different manner. This will create some sort of an illusion that is real in your mind, but you would not realize that you're being, taken into a sort of a magical mindset in a way. But you would think, oh, I'm in reality, I know I am a rational person, but in your mind it would be creating some sort of a magical world where you'll be seeing this person as someone different. And then when you'll shake his hand, you'll feel like, oh, wow, it's so weird that I'm shaking his hand, it's so surreal, so real. So I'm thinking about that. It's got that quality to it.
That's a fantastic point that you raise. I mean, I like to sit here and think, oh, like I just view everyone as people, and there's no way that this would ever start to affect me. It made me think of other examples in modern culture. The first example I thought of that seems to be kind of downstream from this whole royal touch idea is in like evangelical communities that practice like faith healing and stuff like that. Like they even have it. They would even put it on television here in like the 80s and 90s. It's probably still on television. I don't know because I don't have one to see these things, but you know, where they would just bring people up and lay their hands on them and say that they were cured of this or that, et cetera, et cetera. And one wonders if this is the same thing. It's seemingly so, is in effect where you are looking at the minister or the pastor as suprahuman, something beyond human or superhuman, and you have psychologically set it up that they're like psychic gifts, their immortality, their godlikeness is going to course through them and into you. So I think that's one example of where this might still be going on in America. And then something else, you and I, perhaps for different reasons, maybe all three of us, we love the Beatles, right? And I'm thinking about what it was like during. You're wearing a Beatles shirt. I didn't even realize it. You know, I get I get really into this whole Billy Shears thing, but I so I go back in time and I watch a lot of the footage and listen to about like, the Beatles of the early 60s, the early mid 60s before before 66, and just how people in their presence were fainting and passing out and having this hysterics and stuff like that. And in a way it has shades of this. And I guess in general we can apply that to celebrity culture, especially when that celebrity culture is marshaled in such a way to sell the public on certain health practices, right? Like when all the celebrities get together and say, hey, you need to stay 6 feet apart and get the ouchie. Like, you need to do these things. Like, it has those effects. So those were the two things that came up when you mentioned that. Like, and who knows, if I was in the presence of Donald Trump, I like to think like, oh, it's just another person. But you're like, no, they make you wait, and you had this protocol and that protocol. Maybe I would start to gradually think I was meeting something else besides a person. Maybe I would come to see him as the avatar of Jupiter, as I've claimed in other places. Jordan, what do you think about all this?
Oh man, I mean, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole today, but yes.
Which one? Well, don't even say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what do you think about this? I know you got something
Um,
to say about it.
I mean, I feel like you spelled it out pretty well. Yeah.
You're using a tremendous amount of restraint because you know how I'm not crazy about talking about these taboo. Isn't it interesting? Like, I'm afraid to talk about these. I'm afraid to talk about a lot of stuff on here. Like, I've got all sorts of taboos. I've got as many taboos as the Tonga and the Maoris
Yeah.
in New
It's
Zealand.
true.
I do. I'm like
It's
afraid.
true.
I'm gonna scare myself to death if I say the wrong thing, if I say the wrong magical spell.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
at the beginning of this, you kind of laid out a critique of only addressing things on a physical level.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna hear the end of it. All right. I do want to apply it to, if we can go to slide 378. And I mean, I've pretty much said the points that I want to say here, but I wonder. So this is an image of Charles II performing the royal touch, and they would primarily do this for scrofula, which is a form of tuberculosis. And it was just kind of crazy to me that this was going on, and like, you know, within the past 500 years in England and France. And it actually contributed to some interesting political rivalries and some schisms between Protestantism and Catholicism. I don't have all the history on it, but I wonder through, people used to have to go to the king and receive this touch. And as I was thinking about the slide, this when I was going over my notes this morning, there is perhaps rightly so. I'm not sitting here to weigh in on the merit. I'm not trying to judge anyone here. I'm not trying to weigh in on the merits of Anthony Fauci or anything, but there are people that hate this man. There are people that think this man is a god amongst us. Like, and I remember like a lot of, have you ever seen this like kid who changed the lyrics to Mr. Sandman and sang about Anthony Fauci getting him the Action Jackson vaccine? I wonder if 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 the if the jabs themselves are kind of like an extension of this man's touch, and because he was put up in the media and put on such a high pedestal, if something similar to what was going on in the royal touch scenarios is happening with this phenomenon. Like, I feel like a lot of people, wrongly or rightly, like associate the vaccine with this man.
Well, and on the flip side too, like Trump also endorsed it. So you have like a king for each camp
Yeah,
kind of putting their blessing on it. I mean, what is circulating on Twitter this week is the president getting a booster
right.
and people squabbling over what that means or doesn't mean. But yeah, they both put their touch on it. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that being like a contagious magic, like they touch it and then it touches others.
Yeah. And it's the difference between our society and these other quote unquote primitive ones is they didn't have the media apparatus to make it feel like this person was relevant in your life because it comes into your home through the television. You think, oh, this is someone I like and adore, and it's like essentially part of my family, part of my waking existence every single day. If it creates that sort of social bond that people in these societies that were much smaller, where they lived in proximity to their priests and chiefs and their warriors and their manslayers, how they felt about them. Essentially would be, and this is very McLuhan-esque, right? I really need to get into Marshall McLuhan. Like, I think this is the idea that the village has been expanded globally as a result of technology.
I would agree with that.
So, man, I hope I don't. I'm not trying to upset anyone with this, but it all seems
It's
relevant.
been 5 years.
Yeah, it's been 5. Are we past it yet, or is this still like
No, but
triggerable?
you can't help everybody.
Yeah. Okay.
When you're not even saying anything,
Yeah.
like against it. So it's like, yeah, you're just observing
No.
what are the patterns. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Mhm.
Well,
Why? Because it's taboo
yeah.
to
Yeah.
go any further.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's get to the next batch here. So this has to do with mourners. Okay. Was slide 379. So the section's called Mourners Tabooed. And let's see. The gist here is that sacred chiefs and mourners uh, were tabooed, and they could not touch food with hands, and so they had to oftentimes be fed by others or come up with new ways to like feed themselves because of serious contamination issues. So if like people were touching bodies, et cetera, you didn't want the negative aspects of what's associated with death spilling on over to people who you come into proximity with. So, we've talked about the Maoris are in the news lately. I don't know if you guys saw this, but like the parliament got shut down in New Zealand, I think on Friday, because what's this dance that they do there? It's called like the haka or the chaka or something like that. I forget, but it got shut down. So I'm learning a little bit more about them. But for instance, when handling corpses or bones makes mourners tabooed, so they have to eat isolated, or they're fed by outcasts. Again, we have more destruction of dishes and clothes here. In Samoa, mourners are fed by others for days. If they try to handle food, they're going to be cursed with like baldness and tooth loss as a sign of God's punishment. Some people are isolated for months on end, such as with the Tonga. Contact with the dead chief taboos mourners for up to 10 months, no self-feeding. So these are some of those examples. In a way, like it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, at least from our perspective, right? Like we I think we think about not having someone pass on like a contagious disease to us. And so it's like I could see someone saying, or I could see if you believe in like germ theory, maybe one could say like, oh, like the collective unconscious is working in such a way that these taboos come out and disperse people because it's sort of anticipating the right science to justify all the things that they're doing. Maybe one could look at it that way, but maybe not. I don't know. Do we still have this taboo of interacting with dead bodies? I guess if we did, we'd have a problem with like nurses and doctors and morticians and things like that. And I don't know if we necessarily feel that way, although probably it'd be kind of creepy to be in constant proximity to someone who's a mortician. No hate on morticians, but it does kind of carry a little bit of a taboo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think most people in America are like super chill about being around
But if you're
corpses.
like a first responder, you're like handling dead people all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's what you do. But I think by and large, like it's not like everybody is accustomed to it.
I
We've kind
think
of
the
atomized it. Like rather than the family taking care of stuff, we hire professionals not in the family. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a designated role. It's not something that everybody partakes in.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say of like cops and firefighters and EMTs and things that we consider them to be heroes, and they're handling dead people all the time. So it wouldn't. I'm trying to think where it persists in our culture still. What do you think, Ostic?
I mean, it persists in India
Yeah,
because of
tell
the
us about
caste
it.
system. So a lot of a caste is assigned to, only because we have cremations here of dead bodies. So there's a caste of people, they are assigned to only handle these dead bodies, and then they are treated as like they're low caste. They carry death, they carry bad omens, things like that. So there's a
Interesting.
lot of magical thinking here. Yeah, I mean,
What
it's
caste is that? What's it called?
I don't know. I have to look into it. There's a movie made called Masan. Okay, what? Fuck it. I'm not gonna say talk about movies anymore. Okay,
No, it's
because
okay. We love movies.
I mean, yeah. So there's that angle in there, but I don't remember the actual cast name because, but there is social taboos. I mean, even if you come home from a funeral, not supposed to enter the house before you get spilled with holy water. In your culture it's holy water. In our culture it's the water from the river Ganga. It's like the main river of the
Yeah,
country.
it's like a
So
holy
it's like
river,
that.
isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah. So it's like you have to purify yourself before coming in, because otherwise you'll carry those death vibes in your house, and then it the death will infect someone else as well. So it's like
that's
that.
interesting. Yeah, you mentioned the holy water. I think that's I'm a I grew up Protestant, so those ablutions or whatever weren't really part of my upbringing, but I could see those things being more a part of someone who grew up in a Catholic environment.
I mean, even this death thing, it's so traumatic. Back in the day, like when we were like primitive people. So if you see a dead body, so there. I mean, you talked about, track back to the right science by doing these cultural practices. You talked about this, I think. Like we were doing the right science all along by segregating the dead bodies. But I think it carries a lot of emotional toll, and it's like it's a real thing like death. So I think it's where people talk about love and death being the only two things that people should talk about. They're the only two things that are worth talking about, because it involves, a sort of a magical relationship with the world. Because in reality, in objective reality, that person is just a body. It's no longer working. It's like a machine that stopped. But like in our minds there's so many memories and everything, the relationships with people, how they were, how they had been. And I think those taboos around death, I think they helped accentuate that feeling. Because otherwise, if you get desensitized to death, like morticians are or like doctors are, because they have to be, because it's a part of their job. But like it creates a lot of problem in a culture that's desensitized to death. It becomes a normal I think there should be more rituals around death to make it. I'm not saying like you should enforce that, but it's like I consider it a good thing to have these rituals, because here you have 14 days of mourning here. So on first day there will be some rituals, second day there will be some rituals, people would shave their heads, and neighbors would come in. Like we said that you should not make food at your own home after you die. Neighbors would come in and they will bring you food, and that food is what your family would eat, and then you have to wear all whites. you know there's there's a lot of things that go on during those days. So but I'm like, if you're sincere about it, it's a good thing. I'm just saying that from my personal
Yeah.
opinion.
Something I will say too, I'm doing a little introspection as you talk, and as I just speak on the fly here, I mentioned, oh, there might be like a taboo about being a mortician. I started to make this like other running list of like other things that I just have this like reflex to that's like irrational, right? That's like kind of based on like a taboo I've inherited somewhere. Like I think, oh well, what about like someone who handles garbage, or like someone who works at like a water treatment plant, like or something like that. And it's interesting as the explanation for how contamination changes, right? Perhaps the things that we find taboo change as well, you know? Like, why do I have no problem with like first responders handling like a corpse or something like that? But in my mind, there's like kind of an icky feeling associated with being a mortician, because I'm in my, because all this like science background is going through my mind about, you know, the onset of decay and putrefaction and germs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that I've developed a new type of taboo associated with it. And then, like, as someone who's like OCD, you start to think about how that sort of thinking then gets applied to all these like insane places where you start to amplify and attach that taboo to things like that. So I don't know. I guess I don't know how profound what I'm saying is. Um, yeah, even though there's really no reason to have that taboo.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real thing. I think, like Jordan talked about, that we'll discuss economics. I think about this taboo of death in a way that society does everything it can. Like, I had this thought in my teens that society is doing everything it can to hide death from me. Like, like you talk about the Buddha, his what his story is like. His father did everything in his power to hide death from him. Like, he grew up not knowing that death is a thing. So his awakening happened when he found out people actually die. So it's like that for me, and like society is actually doing that, because whenever anything dies, it suddenly gets quickly gets replaced with something new, and you're not even aware of something that's missing. I mean, it happens like we don't not even know where our food is coming from. People, there's industrialized killing of animals. So many animals they get killed. People just see the food on their plate. Oh, it's delicious. I could put some butter on it, and eat
Right.
it. But it's like there's just literally Holocaust levels of violence going on behind the scenes, and people they simply detach from that. All they care about is that, and then the society is working its way to make itself more palatable, cute logos, cute animals, oh whatever, things like that. So I think it's very hideous what people are doing. So I don't know if it's relevant to that, but I'm thinking about these people. It's so taboo that you're hiding it from us, but it's like you're estranging it from us in a way, and it's creating a devaluing effect on our way of life and how we relate to the world. you know so that's why I said that this taboo, it should be more filled with more rituals, so that people are aware of this thing being
Yeah.
happening.
I hear
I'm
what
just
you're
saying that.
saying, and I hear what you're saying. I think it's a really profound point. Like, it's taboo to talk about death itself, right? And so going back to our previous conversation, right? Because our the modern worldview has so compartmentalized and sanitized the life process, and you know, moved it out of our line of sight, right? Like, even with the way that we treat our the elderly within our society, like so many people end up in nursing homes or in hospice, et cetera, et cetera. People aren't dealing with the inevitable decline of the individual, that they don't really have to think about death. And so then when something like death as a result of 2020 is broadcast, does that actually foster a more of a hysterical reaction than is warranted, because death has been cordoned off for so many people? It's not part of their like reality that much. Whereas in these other cultures, or maybe even where you're from, it's 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 really a big part of life. And it's inescapable, and you can't turn your back on it.
I mean, I wouldn't say that it's like inescapable, but it's like we see these things. It's basically in the language that people are not like. It's not big taboo to talk about that. Like, people reference it all the time. Like mothers would tell their children, "I'll die. I'll get old. I'll die. What would you think?"
Yeah.
Fathers. It's like an emotional. I'm just saying this silly thing because it's like it's so trivialized. It's so casual in a way. But like I think that this hysteria you're talking about, it's more pronounced in countries where this death is invisible. Like people don't even have the conception that this can happen to them. So it's like, I think the West has an idea of themselves, thinking of themselves as very protected people. Bad things only happen outside. Those they don't happen here. We can deal with these things. I'm not saying that's bad thing, but it's like, if it something does happen, it creates a very strong reaction within people. You talk about the 2001 event, so like people suddenly so gung ho and like paranoid. People were talking about, I'm not going to go to New York to college because anything can happen suddenly. So it's like that. So people have stronger reactions, I think,
Yeah,
where
and then it
they are more
reinforces.
protective.
Right. Like, so, like, there are people who are still very cautious about who they interact with because of whatever happened in 2020. So then that makes them further isolated, further dependent on media. And if this is psychogenic, it's actually the driver for, you know, what is long COVID? Like, what is it? And why is it affecting some people post vaccination? So, anyhow,
Today I read about
Jordan,
like long COVID affecting children. So it's like, it creates an anxiety for me as well. I mean, even I'm of a skeptical outlook, but even thinking about that creates anxiety. Like, what if I have children down the road and they get infected by long COVID? Maybe like this, some like they talk about long COVID as like person is sitting on a ventilator. It's like so debilitating. They talk about it in a way. It's like pretty insane. It's like, yeah, just whatever. Yeah.
yep. Yep. I think about that a lot, like in terms of, because I don't really like do very much. I work and I do this and I work out. And I think about how whether it's like stories about getting on airplanes and how like the airplanes are falling out of the sky, or like contamination issues with pandemic, or what, like everything seems to be driving us towards further atomization and dependence on technology. Like I wonder if like that's like the point. And so that essentially it's going to be encouraging some sort of merger with technology, or if that's just like some invisible hand, some dialectical working. Like, don't go anywhere. You could die getting on a plane. Don't die. Don't go anywhere. You could get long COVID. Just be on your phone. Watch the TV. Merge. Take the mark. Get the neural link. So
I mean, you brought up a really good point. One last thing. I think in the book White Noise by Don DeLillo, it
yes,
talks
great
about,
book. Great
uh,
book. It's a
yeah,
great book.
yeah, it's a great book. It talks about people. I mean, it's a book about, an invisible
Yeah.
event that happens, and it's paired with what it's paired with. It's paired with images of car crashes and death, and like media talking about media and how explosions are the expression of the American modern life. That other character talks about it, the Don Cheadle character. So what I thought about is that, like, we are so modernized and we are so far away from our like human problems. Like we have everything taken care of. We don't have to like dig wells to bore out water every day and carry it to our homes, little mud huts. And so we need to find, our psychological need is to find bigger problems, and bigger problems is what media are looking for, and to broadcast them into the world so that people can finally pay attention, finally pay attention to what's happening, because otherwise the news would be boring. So that's why they have to, they're so keen on whatever these mass events are happening, and then they broadcast it for days and days and days. They bring up guests and they talk about it, what could have happened, what couldn't have happened. And it's like 3 weeks of continuous talking about this explosion, and then suddenly another explosion occurs, they move on. They don't care about it
Mhm.
anymore. Nobody even checks back. So it's like, it's ridiculous. It's not even about the truth. It's about like getting a reaction out of you, because they know you won't be moved about by like, look at this video of a small dog, what a cute dog, or like we should take. i'm I think you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is the point.
Yeah. All right. Should we go to the section 3, Jordan?
Yeah, you don't want my statistical breakdown of what happened?
Oh, I didn't know you had
I'm
one. I'm
joking.
sorry.
I'm joking. No, I
Are you going to bring up the famous flu versus COVID deaths or
Oh,
whatever?
that's an easy one,
Uh,
but there's so many.
mhm.
There's so many. I think I mean, there's limitations to data, obviously, and also where are we getting the data from
Yep.
is always curious. And the more you dig into things, it's like, what do these categories even mean? Same with all my law studies. It's like when you just start defining all of the words, it's like, huh, okay, this is not how most people are taking in this information. Um, yeah, I was being
Yeah,
just
I'm trying not to be as critical anymore. Everybody's got to have a religion, and
perhaps we
yeah,
try our best to pursue truth,
yep,
but of course we have our own hang-ups and limitations
yep,
and subconscious programs that we work on to release every day. And while we're still on this topic, I think my takeaway through all of this is I already knew this, but it's super important to make sure I have energetic hygiene. So when I'm around other people, I'm not clinging on to their beliefs unknowingly and letting that run the show. Whether it's from media, whether it's from both of you, I should do that as soon as we get off this call. It is not personal, but you know, all of these interesting examples kind of show us even how impressionable our subconscious minds are, just taking in all of the things around us and the people around us.
yeah,
And if the mind creates reality, that has pretty big implications.
yeah. All right.
You're like, I know,
I
Jordan.
no, it's not that. It's we're an hour in, and I'm hungry. I need to have I might need a snack break here soon.
How do
You're
you like
hangry.
how do you clean your subconscious of, you know, is there a
Ooh,
way?
I don't want to derail, but
You talk
yeah,
about
I
that.
mean,
I'm gonna
there's
get a
lots of things you
snack.
can do. Sure. Um, one of my favorite things I do with people is like you just like imagine a lot of it's imaginal techniques, right? Like you can just and maybe you have your own that you already use. But one I really love is like you see this golden bubble and it has like a vacuum technology and you ask it, hey, take out anything I took on from Ostic, from Luke, from today, from work, whatever, that does not serve my highest good, anything that is not truly mine, suck it up. And then I take that bubble once it's full and I hand it up to source, up to spirit, up to God, and I ask that God help transmute that into divine love and that I do not consent to carrying it. That's not what my body, my field are for. It is not to hold on to everybody else's beliefs. And that's kind of it. But I don't know. Are there any techniques that you use, Ostic?
No, I'm very gullible and naive. I get affected. I get affected by what people tell me. That's why I was asking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even I like when I get excited about an idea or I find a new teacher or a new subject, like I do tend to go really hard in the paint and kind of like take in as much of it as possible, but I have learned my lesson more than once that it's really important not to over identify too with that. And it's great that people can share that with me, but like doing some of these practices so I'm not like holding all their shit. Because we're all human. We all have our own like levels of awareness of what's going on. Um, yeah. Yeah. I mean, even these conversations, it's not, it's not a bad thing. Like that's just part of the human experience is how I see it, is that we're going to, interact with each other and kind of get in each other's fields. So it's not like to me it's important to do it with everything, not just things that you deem as like bad influences. It's just like you
Hmm.
don't need other people's your subconscious is already enough.
Yeah, that's nice. I'll try to
Thanks.
practice that.
Yeah, let me know if you need help. Also, I think you downloaded the one of the freebies I had. There's a tapping exercise in there that I do with the golden bubble, but like those would be helpful too.
Yeah, I'll look into that. Thank you.
Yeah, let me know if you yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know, Luke, what's your testimony to the golden bubble?
It's effective when I'm stressed
Yeah?
out. It's effective.
Yeah. I'd say Luke does it more as, like, a reactive strategy. You okay? I do it probably more proactively.
I could be working on things better. So,
Oh, couldn't we all?
yeah,
Couldn't we all?
yeah,
I'm not perfect.
pretty close. Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right. Let's look at section 3, okay? This is cultural beliefs and taboos on women at menstruation and childbirth. So, this is similar to other things that we've talked about, but the menstruation and postpartum women's items cause spiritual pollution, which mirror the chief's taboos that we talked about earlier. And just a couple examples of this. Um, it's really about there's some kind of harm or death that come from encountering the items that are associated with women when they're in these situations. So in Australia, amongst the Aborigines, menstruating women were forbidden to touch men's items. And that could ultimately culminate in death for both the woman and the violator. In Uganda, here we go with the pots again. Pots touched during menstruation, childbirth destroyed, and spears and shields have to be purified as a result of their defilement. So, I mean, these are just some examples. It's a thing. I think Jordan probably has a little bit more to say about this. I think, didn't you say that you had something you wanted to say about this?
About the menstruation?
The menstruation taboos. I feel like you said something to me, but maybe I'm imagining things.
Yeah, maybe you're projecting onto me because you get to interact with me all the time.
Yeah.
Y yeah, I just find it all fascinating, like, different ways of, navigating that, but I also think I don't know, I have some pretty out there ideas about menstruation in general, and I don't think we're as bound to the stereotypes of what it has to manifest as we're led to believe. So I this stuff kind of makes sense to me in a more traditional like, oh, uh like that Instagram reel that does make me laugh really hard where he says like I flew too close to the sun during her luteal
Mhm.
phase with that joke. Like that does crack me up. Also though, I don't think it has to be that way. But in that context, like yeah, it kind of makes sense to have some of these taboos to keep the peace.
I don't know if we have these. I don't know if we have these taboos in our culture now. Um,
Well,
I mean, there are
I
jokes,
can tell
right?
you, my father never ever wants to talk about it. Like I remember very clearly sitting at the table once and I just did not feel well. Also, I ate like shit, like et cetera, et cetera. Lifestyle was terrible. So like I don't have the same type of experience all the time now. But I was having cramps and he kept trying to ask me what was wrong. And I was like, oh, don't worry about it. And then I finally told him and he was like, didn't want to talk about it. So I do think maybe generationally it's stronger in generations prior to you, Luke. But and he had 3 sisters. It's not like he wasn't around it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's an interesting question about something that we may find like mystifying. I hate to say it's like slash like disgusting or something like that, but
Mm,
I don't think it actually is like a taboo. It's just kind of like like an impulse. But I guess you could see how that impulse like could snowball into where it becomes like a societal taboo. But I don't
yeah, like
quite see the
what is a
connection.
taboo?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like we have some of these that are super defined, but if it's just this like visceral instinctual reaction of like I can't like be around this topic or
I
thing,
never,
like
I never,
to me that sounds like a
I
taboo.
never felt like I was like gonna get it. Like I was gonna start having the effects of like menstruation or something like that because like there was a shared object that had become polluted
Mm.
as a result of this use. You know what I'm
Is
saying?
that a requirement of taboo? I don't
I think that's
know.
the idea with these different cultures. Like it's like
Yeah.
pots or a spear or something that they drank out of or something like that. Like
Yeah.
something's going to come. Although we'll see a little bit later maybe, and these things are like not so neatly defined, I think, as Frazer portrays them as. There was in the section on like warriors and stuff like that, like the men would not have sexual relations or really even speak to women and stuff like that because they're afraid that it might make them like too feminine for battle, right? They're like the femininity is gonna like rub off on them, and they're gonna be like weak and won't be able to be like trained killers because of the association with women. So
So
I don't
there,
know, like where one of these taboos begins and ends is kind of mystifying.
so there are no taboos regarding menstruation in America.
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, it's not something you bring up in polite company, but you also don't like bring up your bathroom habits in polite company either. I mean,
Yeah, that's
maybe we
interesting.
should. Maybe we should. We should just put it all out there. But I really don't want to hear about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what the reaction of Jordan's father was like, oh, this is lady stuff. Ladies should
Yeah,
talk. I'm not the person. I'm not the person,
yeah.
you know.
I mean,
And that's
do you
how
have
I
this in
felt.
India? Do you have this in India?
I think there used to be a lot of taboo around menstruation here. So people, I think what happens is like as women started to work, so those taboos suddenly, slowly started to, disappear. But people had these taboos, like you should not pray during if you're having, these periods, or you should not go out if there's an eclipse because it could render you infertile or something. There are things like you should not participate in, festivals if you have this. There
Hmm.
are things. Yeah, there was a huge social movement, a few years back that, I mean, in the rural areas, women do not, they, because people, if they are not very educated, they believe in these things. So they had to be, there was a huge movement in the whole country. So people used to, like supply these free of charge, things like that. So the pads, I mean, the pads were being supplied free of charge. So to educate people there that you should, because it's like so shameful to talk about. They do not even they do not even realize that it could cause like diseases if you it's not like being treated well. It's using whatever paper, whatever cloth to clean this. Yeah, that was a problem, but I think now it's changing.
Well, in America, we bleach it. Like, what the actual H?
Yeah.
But anyway,
Bleach it, what
maybe
do you mean?
TMI on this topic.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, like the pads and stuff, oh, it's sanitary. Then they call them sanitary napkins. Is like what they call like pads. Oh, but it's like full of chemicals. Great.
All right. All right. I want to move on. I don't want to talk about this stuff.
See, it's kind of a taboo.
I would argue that it's
We're
something
using the.
different.
I just googled the definition of taboo, and I think it's
All
accurate.
right.
But I respect that that's not quite how Fraser is
It's
using it.
it's part of it's also that we have so much to cover here. Um, let's go. I mean, we didn't really talk about the postpartum stuff. But it's all the same deal. One of these, I mean, some of these are crazy. On 382, like miscarriages are an issue. They like
Yeah.
miscarriages were seen as like this polluting taboo or this polluting source of taboo. For the Bantu, the Bob Petty of South Africa, that if it wasn't potentially handled correctly, it could cause cosmic disorder and barrenness. So they had to do all these like special burials um, and whatnot and cleansings. That's one example of that. But we can go to Warriors on 383 unless Osik has something to say.
No, I forgot it now. I
Oh,
had something, but suddenly I forgot it. Yeah.
I feel you. I think I've mentioned the stuff about Warriors, the gist of it already, but um, this gets into like spirits and ghosts and hauntings and things like that from killing things. So like the Warriors were placed in spiritual quarantine due to the perceived dangers surrounding them, both for like preparing for battle and afterwards. So let's I mean, let's see here. It was all about cleanliness, purity practices. The Maoris of New Zealand, the warriors of Warpath, highly tabooed, leaders unapproachable, observed unique customs. They maintained their spiritual sanctity and had ceremonial purity rites. Um, the North, a general with the North American Indians, novice warriors use exclusive vessels, avoid scratching with fingers, sleep facing homeland, no stepping over others' bodies or belongings. Got to keep them spiritually pure. The Creek Indians abstain from sexual intercourse 3 days before and after war. Um, I think the idea, from what I could gather going over this material earlier today, part of like remaining spiritually pure is that um, you don't want to like set yourself up for like haunting and the visitation of the spirit later on, like of whether it's like a sacred animal or the thing that you kill in hunting or a person. And it's like weird. They have like all this like guilt about killing people, but they have like, and it's like, and then afterwards they have all these different rites and rituals that they do. But as I mentioned earlier, if we go to slide 384, I think these were the instances about um, feminine weakness being transmitted to different people. So like the Kayans of central Borneo would avoid touching women's looms or clothes to ensure success in hunting and fishing and war. And the Assam hill tribes would not cohabitate with women um, for similar reasons. So yeah, just interesting stuff. I mean, this whole thing about not not interacting with women before like a battle. The only thing I can really think of in like a modern context is like this no fap movement. Like there's a lot of talk about athletes like not engaging in sexual intercourse or sexual release in any way because it'll somehow put them at a disadvantage, whether like they're like boxing or playing football or something like that. I don't know if it's a widespread practice, but um I think it's kind of grounded more on the pathway. I think the if there is science behind it, and it could be negligible, it's the idea of like, oh, I'm not going to just freely release these competitive hormones, this testosterone that gives me this competitive advantage when in whatever contest that I'm doing. So I need to like store it up and then I can like release it later. And I guess I understand intuitively the logic of that. I don't think the science is like conclusive that that actually has a positive effect, but a lot of anecdotal reporting does. Yeah, Ashik.
Yeah, I mean, I with these warrior cults, I think I can think about it in terms of, these people, why do they have to have these purity rites? Because all these purity rites would bind them together in a sort of a contract. You have,
Mm,
why do
that's
they have
true.
these degrees? Yeah, you have a bit more access. You are more trustworthy person. So because they have to trust each other in battle. So it's like, if you're willing to do this for me, we are somehow bound together, we are more connected if you're willing to go through these rites. And if you have all gone through these rites, I mean, you talk about military boot camp, they're going through so many physical rites and everything, and they bond together, they get yelled at by the same sergeant, and then they think about each other, and then they respect each other from a distance. There's these things that are building a sort of a union between them, that they are this one people. And it's a bonding activity.
That's a
I saw
fantastic
this.
that's a fantastic
Yeah,
observation. You could apply this to, obviously to Full Metal Jacket as you're mentioning like the modern military context. I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Like that's so obvious. And because there's all
yeah,
this like weird unchanneled sexual energy that's in Full Metal Jacket, whether whenever they're talking about like the women back home or the interactions with the prostitutes in Vietnam, like there's that's good. I like that. I like that. That would be like a good little like essay or paper. Like, what does Frazer say about the taboos of warriors and how it's relevant to Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket? Like, I could see that being an interesting
yeah.
essay.
That's interesting. I mean, yesterday I saw this movie that came out. I think you guys should watch it too. It's called The Smashing Machine, and it stars The Rock. It's by Benny Safdie. So it's about the UFC fighters, like the people who actually started the whole UFC thing. So
Oh.
in that film itself, there's this guy who would be, punching these his opponents like bloody red, like his name is Smashing Machine. He just smash people to the ground, and then after the fight he'll hug them, he'll take photographs with them, and they have this respect for each other. Like, I'm so like, what they talk about is like, I'm so honored that you decided to like take spar with me. You decided that I should be in your presence and I should take this punch. Like, there's something going on in there. And there's his girlfriend, and what she does is like, her character, she feels very sad that she's not being able to have a normal relationship with him, because he's like smiling with the people that who are beating him like bloody and like breaking his neck in the ring, and like he cannot have a normal relationship with her. And he talks about like, I'm in a different world. It's like, I cannot have you. You do not understand. Don't speak the same language. I feel so much closer to my opponents who beat me up than
Mm.
I feel close to you. So, there's this actual theme of the movie is this line. So, and then they have to connect on a different level. But like, they live in a different reality itself. So what Kubrick talked about in an interview, like, what do soldiers feel like? Like, he talked about the basic psychological thing about soldiers was that they thought that they were immortal, they cannot die. They had this instilled in them after years, after months of training and everything. So when they go out into the battlefield, they believe in themselves that they cannot die. So I think that's a, like, why am I saying this actually? Why did not die? Okay. I
No, it's
mean,
great.
these taboos, because it's like, you do not understand us. We have been through a different experience altogether, and we understand each other better than we understand women. And there's like, when if you ejaculate or something like that, you feel, it's like you lose something in your body. It's like you lose control of your emotions, of your mind, of what you should be doing, things like that. So it's like, they it twists with their brains, like, why did I feel like that? Why should I feel? Why am I in this vulnerable place? I should be with my boys. I wish we could. They do not understand this language. They're in a different, they're like a fish out of water. They do not know how to interact in that situation. So it's like, it creates complications for them. It's not, you do not know how do you deal with the lady. It's like, it's a funny thing. It's like a problem as old as time, but it's like, so they feel comfortable with the boys. You can just banter with them. There's no stakes. Whatever happens, you can hit them, whatever. So it's like, yeah,
What's also relevant in all this, like we're kind of having this conversation in America. It's been really going on since the 90s, but um there's like this great like push and pull going on about like what our armed forces look like. And now that the Republicans are in charge, like there's this effort to um some people would say that there is this effort to like purge the more like feminine elements from the military. And you could trace it back to these prehistoric taboos here.
yeah. I mean, there's that, but I've got a feeling that if you're, I mean, with people like these in the military, you have to earn your respect, and if you manage to earn some sort of respect within them, they do not care what person you are. If you're a girl, if you're gay or whatever, I don't think they are those kind of people, because they actually, they're bathing naked in the same showers every day. It's not like they're very super, uptight about, all their sexuality and everything. I think it's about respect. Are you able to like pull through? Would I have to pull your weight? With Private Pile, he was a dude, but he was still ostracized from the
Mm.
boot camp members because he could not pull his own weight. He could not earn the respect of the other people, who he was surrounded by. So I think that plays a like a better role, than the real gender of the people that are in the military. Like, women are very respected, I think. It's not that they're treated with less respect in the military, because the military bros know, like, oh, She's with them. She has been through the drills. She knows her stuff. So it's like
Well,
that. And it's,
it,
I
it
think,
it
I don't
depends
know,
on the branch
maybe
of the
the
military too.
yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
it's a whole
I'm
thing.
just
It's a
thinking
whole
about,
thing. Yeah. Jordan, what do
sorry if
you want to
I'm
be
speaking out of line. Yeah.
No, no, you're fine. It's just a massive subject area, and it's just a massive subject area, and we have so much to cover. Jordan, you want to weigh in before we move on to the next section?
I'm gonna move it forward and then I'm gonna run and I'll be right back.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we are talking about, what are we talking about manslayers now? Okay. So here, victorious warriors, particularly those who have killed enemies, face stringent taboos driven by fear of the slaying's vengeful ghosts, dispelling doubts that such rules stem from rational prudence rather than superstition. These taboos isolate warriors like sacred chiefs or mourners through practices such as living in separate huts, avoiding sexual contact, and not using others' vessels. So mirroring the restrictions that are part of other groups. Um, we can just take a couple examples here. In Timor with the headhunters, they reside in a hut for 2 months. They're fed by others. They make sacrifices. They dance, and they do songs to appease the slayin's soul. The Wanigala River in New Guinea, the killers purified by cleansing weapon, eating banana centers, kangaroo organ rituals, and shouts victims' names. So I think they like take the intestines and rub it over themselves or whatever. We can go into a bunch of different ones of these. Like clearly they have like feelings of guilt about what they've done, which is kind of interesting, right? The fact that um they're not remorseless and feel the need. Now, maybe do they really feel the guilt of killing people in battle or elsewhere? Um, do they really feel the guilt over it, like objectively, like from like a Kantian perspective, or is it that because they are so uh, bought into this idea of like haunting spirits that they don't want to be afflicted by it? So it raises an interesting question if like their own conscience is interpreted as like the spirit of someone else.
Yeah, that's interesting thing. I mean, Pinocchio has a Jiminy cricket on his
Right.
shoulder. That's his conscious. So it's telling him what's right, what's wrong. I mean, people know what's right, what's wrong. That it's wrong to kill someone, and it's a big deal to actually like take one's life. So because as you grow older, you are aware of what a life entails. Like as you grow, more you'll know about how precious life is, how many experiences a person would have had up until that point. If you're like an aware individual, if you're paying attention, like if you're desensitized, so that's a different thing. But like you understand the magnitude of what you're doing if you're like killing someone. So I think
Yeah.
that creates a problem.
I mean, the other examples, I mean, there's like 12 different examples that Fraser gives. They're all pretty gory and graphic and interesting in their own way. I don't know if I need to give any more examples than the one I did. Is there one that caught your attention, Ostic, that you want to dwell on? Or I mean, they're all kind of the same. It's all really about dispelling the haunting of a ghost.
Yeah, there's I mean, it's the beauty of the mind itself, I should say. That is what I feel because I don't I don't think animals feel remorse when they kill for food because that's to them their food. I don't think they have this thing called of him remorse, but like we have that because I don't think we are meant to kill each other. we we are not meant to kill each other because we are social beings. But like I don't know. I think killing is something high up there that a
Yeah.
person does. It's like we take it for granted nowadays, but because it's happened so many times throughout history, but it's like actually doing that. It's a big thing in my mind. I was also thinking about one thing, one final thing about
Sure.
the menstruation thing and childbirth thing. I think for one thing is about the women are in a vulnerable state when they have the child with them, and as soon as the child is taken from them, they fall into postpartum depression or something like that. So that could have been, might have been interpreted as some, like a bad spirit has inflicted that woman, so she must not be around the child in case she might infect the new life, things like that. So like, even in menstruation, I think what they act on are the visible things. What is visible to me? Okay, this woman before menstruating and after menstruating, there are visible effects on the outside, like, graphical, like concrete effects, and then they try to form a ritual around it. This concrete effect, how do we counter its effect, even though we do not know the real explanation or like what's actually happening? So so I think, like, before, they could have interpreted the woman like being possessed by something that caused this to happen. Even in horror movies, we see like ghost people that are possessed, they're vomiting things, things like that. I'm not saying that it's equivalent. I'm saying that what tangible changes, like what's actually concrete and visible, are the things that are being targeted by these rituals. Like, things that are invisible, they are being left to the wayside. So yeah.
No. Jordan, you want to say something about these manslayers? I know you kind of ducked out there for a second. I mean, and if you want me just to recapitulate the idea, the idea is that even if you're killing someone that you're opposed to, from a, there's societal competition or it's murder or something like that, there is still a strong sense of remorse where these different rituals occur in order to cleanse oneself of of guilt or haunting by the spirit of the deceased. It kind of depends on what we're talking about here. And we had this whole conversation about whether or not like one's conscience is being interpreted as some sort of ghost. This is my interpretation, and it raises very interesting questions about the primacy of the psyche, right? That that these earlier cultures, even in the West, weren't properly understanding the true constitution of the psyche, and were attaching all this folk religion to it in order to explain it. You're muted, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me a lot of the stuff that came up in the previous chapter of like people like only eating inside. It reminds me of like the soul being able to move around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's like a period in a lot of these different cases, like it's like 3 days or 10 days or something like that, where like the soul sort of like exists in like a limbo state. It doesn't haunt you forever, but there's like it lingers for a little while. And while it's lingering for a little while, you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to make sure it doesn't like terrorize you or infect the rest of the community with, misfortune, whatever that may be interpreted as. So anyhow, I think we have one last section. Is that right? This is hunters. Yeah, cultural beliefs and taboos on hunters and fishers. Again, this is like the manslayers, except this time they have all these different animals that they view as sacred. So I'll just read this. In savage societies, hunters and fishers follow abstinence and purification rituals similar to those of warriors and manslayers, likely driven by fear of the spirits of animals they kill or plan to kill. Savages attribute souls and intelligence to animals, treating them with respect akin to human spirits, aiming to appease their ghosts as they do with slain enemies. These rituals include taboos observed before or during hunting and fishing seasons to ensure success and safety. After a successful hunt, hunters and fishers undergo purification ceremonies to neutralize spiritual dangers from the animal's spirits. And we've got all different types of examples here. The Nootka Sound Indians, they have week-long fasts, they bathe, they do body rubbing, and there's no women for whaling. And if they don't do these things, they're going to have failure on the hunt. The Mabueg, they've got to practice continence during turtle pairing season, otherwise the turtles will flee. This is a seasonal October-November taboo, and this is replicated in many different ways. Yeah. I mean, there's also the idea that sexual incontinence could somehow contribute to, and maybe in some sense, to the weakening of the hunter and the fisherman, but also in terms of like scary, like driving the animals away. Maybe on slide 389, we can look at that. I'm trying to think of the connection, how they established that connection, where they saw like sexual continence was like essential for success. Like in Laos, the salt pan workers abstain from sex and no head covering, and they're gonna like it doesn't even, it's also, I should say, it's not just with hunting and fishing, it also like with building, like with the Laos, they can't like build a building properly if they break sexual continence for similar reasons. So yeah, it's all mixed up in this. I'm not exactly sure how it translates to our modern society, but yeah.
Hmm. I don't know. These are pretty out there. These ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, maybe it is due to the scarcity of these things. You have very little control, so it's like, okay, God, I'm gonna be so still. I'll not do anything. Please let me have it. Please let me have these fishes. Please let me have these silkworms. Maybe things like that. It's like maybe it's a scarcity thing that's creating these things. They don't have control, so they're creating these stories for themselves. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
maybe that's like a result of some sort of bargain they're making with the deity. Like, I'll do this, like, if you just give me that, because of scarcity concerns. That's an interesting theory.
Yeah, people do that all the time here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I thought it was interesting it got applied to building villages. Like, it's not just hunting and fishing. I mean, it's interesting in and of itself that it has to do with hunting and fishing, but then it like actual construction of structures that we're doing the similar sorts of taboos. So anywho, I mean, I think we pretty effectively covered it. Unless, Jordan, I'll give you the last word there, and then I want to go into some of the research findings. I might need a short break if that's okay.
Yeah, why don't we do that? And then I know there is quite a bit left
I can.
post Golden Bough.
Yeah. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay,
Okay.
you got it.
Asa, can you?
I'm just gonna go through the next few for a few seconds.
Oh, we're recording. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought you knew that, but
No, I was. All right. So bring up my footprint if you can, please. Slide 393.
there you go.
All right. So now we get into the real interesting stuff. I wanted to spend the last section of this conversation cleaning up some of the odds and ends and points of inspiration from the previous broadcast. So we talked a little bit about the numinosity of the number 11, and shortly thereafter, it occurred to me, because at that time I was like, you know, I'm not really seeing a lot of great information about the number 11 in von Franz and Jung and how this would potentially apply to Apollo 11. Though, given the role of the I Ching in Jung, perhaps that offers like an aperture into understanding the significance of Apollo 11 through that. And I realized that a synonym for hexagram 11 in the I Ching which is generally considered peace, harmony, is also tranquility. And that's so interesting because the Apollo 11 Eagle landed in the Sea of Tranquility, and they talk about the base of operation there being tranquility base. So I'm not saying that this is a slam dunk, like, oh yes, I Ching hexagram 11 perfectly corresponds to Apollo 11, but I think it does offer a bit of a confirmation of that way of analyzing things. Although I'm not going to say this is like the framework we're going to use to decode all these different numbers in the missions. But thinking about that got me thinking about this iconic symbol, the Buzz Aldrin's footprint, right? This is something that's been drilled into our minds from birth. And it's just kind of like, oh yeah, that's Buzz Aldrin's footprint. But of course, this has like a deeper meaning that's touching the collective unconscious that perhaps none of us have really sat there and contemplated about. So I just want to talk about a foot. I want to talk about feet and footprints and footsteps for a little while. And then that obviously led to doing something which I think is a really rewarding endeavor, is like looking at all the different names of the craters and the landing spots and the maps. I think I want to do like one decode of the landing site for like the next 7 podcasts or whatever. So what I have here on the left is the most substantive aspects of footprint, footstep from the Penguin Dictionary of Symbols, which is an invaluable resource. It might just help. Jordan, do you want to read that?
Sure.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Just to kind of...
Do you want the whole thing or just the things you underlined?
Why don't you go read the whole thing? Because it'll put us in the mindset.
All right. So footprint, or footstep. The legends are well known, that of the Buddha at his birth measuring out the universe by taking 7 steps in each of the quarters of space, or that of Vishnu doing the same thing with 3 strides, the first corresponding to the earth, the second to the intermediate world, and the third to heaven. And also, as is sometimes said, to dawn, noon, and sunset. In East Asia, innumerable Vishnupada and Buddhapada have even the occasional Shivapada are worshipped. They are the footprints of God, of the Bodhisattva upon human earth. Similarly, Christ's footsteps are shown on the Mount of Olives, those of the immortal Pyeongchu on Mount Daoying, and those of Muhammad at Mecca, and in several of the great mosques. The mother of the millet prince Hu Qi gave birth to him because she stepped in the footprint of the celestial emperor. Pilgrims' footprints are to be found round many shrines. In making his mark, the pilgrim is not saying, I was here, but stating, here I am and here I stay, as the occasional inscriptions found in them bear witness when they express the desire to remain in the presence of the Godhead. And yet it is said of the Buddha and of the great Buddhist saints that they are out of reach, untrackable. Here we come to the universal symbolism of the footprint, which is the track which the hunter follows in life and the spiritual huntsman in symbol. But these tracks only take us to the gateway of the sun, to the bounds of the cosmos. Beyond that, they vanish, since the Godhead, serpent-like, loses his feet at the beginning and at the end. Within the context of a hierarchical order of spiritual states, the footprint of the higher state is lost in the foot of the vertical axis, and hence in the central state, which is that of the, quote, true man of Chinese tradition, Chen Zhen. It is therefore impossible to discern the footprint in question unless in that central state.
All right. Thank you very much. Fantastic reading. And there's a lot more. I cannot say enough about the importance of this text, the Penguin Dictionary of Symbols. Like, it really should. I just want to buy a whole box of them and hand them out to people so they can help navigate their lives for them. There are many things to pull from in this section. And the reason why I had you read it is like, there's just so much information. I needed a moment to compose my thoughts. But one of the first ones that came to mind was that these footprints religiously can be seen as a way that multiple realms are interacting with one another, the, where deities and immortal beings from other spheres, from other realities, come into our realm, right? Like we have these holy steps, whether they be Christ's steps or Muhammad's steps or someone else's steps. Like it's kind of an imprint of a god that came to Earth or something like that. So I think when we look at this imprint on the moon, I think it's conjuring up some of that ancestral memory there. So I think that's very important when we think about the importance of this symbol. Secondly, um, footprints, I think, because they make tracks, uh, lead us to the idea that there is something about going to the moon that is a spiritual journey. Okay, maybe perhaps we can even talk about it in terms of Jungian alchemy and individuation or something like that. But I think these steps speak to the quest that we are all sort of going on through these world historical events. Um, and I think lastly, the thing that jumped out, Jordan, from the reading that you just did there is how footprints are often associated with shrines, right? These religious sites and grounds. Like specifically, I think about Mecca and the circling of the Hajj and the path that is made in that process. And the footprints themselves, in a way, if seen as a place where a superhuman being is interacting with the soil, in a way, imbues the object with religious numinosity. So I had never really just taken the time to stare at this image and think about what it must mean. But at least those three things are the ones that jump out to me. Did something else jump out to you guys?
Uh, what
Yes,
I thought
Austin.
about in terms of footprints, I thought the first thing that came to my mind was The Shining, and where Jack,
Oh
he's following his
yeah,
footsteps into the maze, and then he, disguises his footsteps and then walks backwards and hides somewhere else. But it says that in the end, when Jordan was reading, it says that those footprints disappear at the beginning and at the end. It talks about that. So I thought, like, and from the perspective of Jack, is like the footprints disappearing would mean that he has reached the end of the Ouroboros and is now ready to be reincarnated again, maybe. So like, and he does, you know, he gets reincarnated back into the photograph, things like that. I'm just thinking about, and like it's a good, it's a thing, people talk about footprints a lot in India. It's as well, it literally says that people worship feet. I have replicas of feet, so people put flowers on them. There's songs about lotus feet, things like that. Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I love that you brought up the footprints in The Shining. It does really look like this Buzz's footprints here. Don't really, it looks like snow in some sense, right? It
Yeah, yeah,
draws that
yeah.
connection even tighter. And Danny is able to get out of the labyrinth, out of the maze, because he retraces his steps, right? And so, what is the lesson there, right? Like we ought to be fixated on these footprints, and that ultimately, like, this will get us out of the maze, will save us from the Minotaur.
Yeah, that's a good reading. And one thing again, like you talked about, like this footprint being a shrine. So it's like a shrine for humanity itself. Because even Neil Armstrong, he talked about this one step for a man and like a giant leap for mankind. He was, in a sense, implicating the entire human race into his one single action. So it's like, he is creating that kind of a shrine for the whole of humanity in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's saying
Mm.
it out loud.
What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about footprints all that much before, but it
Yeah,
it makes sense that they would be. Well, we did talk about it much earlier in the Golden Bough series. It came up. There was an example in the Golden Bough specifically. I forget the details, but the importance of like not disturbing the footprints or like it was a contagious magic thing.
yeah.
But it's interesting, this little bit from the Penguin Dictionary, it's talking about 7, it's talking about 3, it's like the Ouroboros. There's so many different things packed in here from so many different traditions, which is really cool. It's, you know, we are in the material, so it's like, in a way, like, the footprint is an impression of something that like, it's what's left, right? Like, the presence of the being that created it might be no more or not be there anymore. I don't know, just the idea of it's like the impression into the earth, or in this case, the moon, that's left behind is super fascinating to me. It is a marker of traveling between these different realms, in the case of, like, the heaven, the earth, etcetera. Um, yeah, it's just super cool. Also, with the birth certificates, they take the children's feet and they stamp
Right.
them
That's right.
on the documents to give them res to allow that document to act as a, I believe, surety, um, based off of the credit that is created from, like, that being's life force, which is super fascinating and such an interesting rabbit hole. Um, yeah, it's kinda endless the ways that this manifests throughout law, throughout religion.
Something else that just occurred to me when you were talking about the connection between a print and the body and sympathetic magic.
Mhm.
We've talked a little bit the we've talked a little bit about doubles, and I wonder
Yes.
if the impression that a footprint makes, if somehow it's a reflection of ourselves, if somehow it's like perhaps connected to our shadow. And I think that might be, I think it was it last time we were talking about doppelgangers and doubles and we were talking
Mhm.
about shadows, right? We were talking about how in these primitive societies they viewed the shadow or their shade as like as part as a replication of their soul, and hence why like people could try, we're doing all these different taboos to make sure that sorcerers couldn't steal them, et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder if that connects to this. It's so interesting too when you dig into this. There's been a lot of effort because a lot of people, like moon landing denier people, like say, oh yeah, well, like how come I can't put a telescope like up and see the American flag and see the footprints that are supposedly left behind? Like this is the evidence that we went there, right? And I think in like 2009 there was some effort to like put a probe or like a satellite or something like that around the moon, and you can actually, there are these images that have been produced where you can like zoom in, like hyper zoom in, and like see the tracks on Tranquility Base. Now of course, because people, I think there were people within the NASA that were being like, we really need to like document this better. And of course, it zooms in so incredibly fine. It's like, are we looking at original images anymore, or what are we looking at, right? So it yeah, yeah. Anyhow, I think that's good. I want to look at the the landings the landing spots, if that's okay, or the Apollo 11 landing spot. We go to 394. Okay, so
It gets fun.
it does get fun. It's going to get real fun, especially when we start to zoom in. So there is a lot to be said about all these different craters and who is associated with what. Some of these seemed relatively banal to me, others were more interesting. So you see there the yellow dot where the Tranquility Base is. We're going to zoom in on that. You can see there's some features there that are not part of this larger map that I put together, but I have a little story to tell about each one of these. So to start with, perhaps we can look at Dionysius crater. Now, that was particularly interesting to me because we've talked about the role of the Nietzschean choice that was involved in the two metaphysical forces that seem to be represented with the Apollo landings and the Woods and with Woodstock. That was, I think, rather well articulated by Ayn Rand. Now, this Dionysius is not the god of wine and fertility that we associate with Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy, supposedly. It is associated with Dionysius the Areopagite, I believe is how you say that, who was a first century Athenian judge who converted to Christianity by the Apostle Paul. Regardless, the name Dionysius does come from the Greek god of wine and fertility, Dionysus, and in a way, you could it's kind of a twofer. In some way, you could say that both of them are represented here in this crater, and then that brings in Nietzsche, who, interestingly enough, shares a death day with Neil Armstrong. They both die on the 237th day of the year, August 25th. And you can see that the three astronauts get their own craters, Aldrin Collins and Armstrong crater. So I thought that was particularly interesting. Now, this landing site was there was a man that was largely responsible. There was a lot of input taken from the astronauts and a variety of different engineers. But this guy's name is Farouk Elbaz. If you watch Star Trek, you may realize that some of the shuttles are named after Farouk Elbaz. And in addition to choosing these landing sites, he is responsible for creating the Moon Touch project, where all these different museums across the country actually display fragments of moon rocks that they brought back from the moon, so you can go and touch it. And the reason why he developed this project, it seems kind of natural, is that he's Egyptian and he was quite familiar with the pilgrimage to Mecca. And so in a way, he took inspiration from that so that people could go into these science museums and touch a rock that, if we look at it mythologically and all this other stuff, is associated with, associated with moon deities, right? Like with Diana, the Virgin Mary, the Great Mothers, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, are we reading too much into this, or is there something like really, really fascinating happening here? Things could be said about Ritter and the Sabine craters. I guess I have a little bit about them. But the one that really, I guess we could say something about the Sabine craters. They're named after this guy named Edward Sabine, who was a 19th century British astronomer who essentially determined the oblate spheroid nature of the Earth by using these different pendulums. He went all over to different longitude and latitudes with pendulums to determine rotation and spin and all that. That's kind of interesting. The one that was intriguing to me was Moltke crater, and it's named after Helmuth von Moltke the Elder, who was widely considered to be this nationalistic German hero. He was incredible with theory of war and different types of battle plans, et cetera, et cetera. And perhaps there's nothing going on here. The thing that was super interesting to me about that is that the amount of German ingenuity, because of Operation Paperclip, we subsumed all these German rocket scientists to make the Apollo missions happen. Wernher von Braun being the one that's most obvious. So it's intriguing to me that a German national hero would be on the world stage in this way, or the moon stage, I should say. But I even have some more interesting things that I want to zoom in on, because I know it's getting super late where Hostic is. So I want to be respectful of that, and I can use all this research later. So if we zoom in, you can start to see some of the finer features that were associated with the Eagle landing. It's going to land right next to this little crater called Double, and the astronauts named it. They kind of it didn't really supposedly have any significance for them. And just to the east of these larger craters, Little West and West. And what's so interesting about that, just on the face of it, I didn't get into the whole cat's paw thing. I find that to be interesting in the sense that the moon is a little bit like a litter box. But what's so interesting, what's so interesting about this is that both Double crater and Little West crater it took until 2017 for both of these to be acknowledged as like legitimate craters or craterlets or whatever by the IAU. And they both got legitimized on the same day, July 26th, 2017. And I know Ostick knows the significance of that date. That is both Carl Jung and Stanley Kubrick's birthday. So I found that to be uncanny. But let's zoom in a little bit deeper if we can. So I think I cracked the riddle of this. If you go to the next slide, Jordan. And Jordan, I'm going to try to talk about this somewhat delicately. All right.
Because
So
it's taboo
it is taboo. I'm
for
not going
you.
to, yeah.
But there's, yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
Many people are happy to just
Yeah.
rant on and on and on about it.
So the Apollo Eagle lander lands right next to Double crater. And it's in between Little West and then further west it's west, right? And I got to thinking about this. I was like, why is this? Why is it? And then I just read it from left to right. And I read it left to right. It goes Double Eagle, Little West. And I mean, the Double Eagle is this profoundly alchemical and Masonic symbol. And the reason why I know this in small part is that it's well documented that Buzz Aldrin took a double eagle Masonic flag to the moon. So it seems to me that we're either dealing with a great cosmic coincidence that the eagle landed next to the double crater so that we get the double eagle, or there was some intentionality with this. It doesn't really matter too much for my larger thesis that I'm developing. What I want to look, but the thing is, I don't want to like dwell on this whole like Masonic element, because I think I've expressed in a variety of different episodes here that this is much bigger than any organization. This is, in my opinion, this is the universe operating through world events. And
these symbols predate what we know
exactly
of these secret societies.
Right.
Like, they were not the first people to use these symbols or use these, whether they be metaphors or literal or both at the same time, as I tend to think symbols, that's how they operate on multiple levels.
Yeah.
Like, they did not start here. They're pervasive across all sorts of different mystery schools.
Right. So that's where this is. I think that's where this is going. So, Freemasonry only came about in the 18th century, and the concept of the double eagle goes back like a millennia, if not more. Some people argue that it's like traced to like Hittite regions of history. So, but what is important about studying this double eagle is that it's relevant to our conversation about the integration of opposites. We've looked at some of these images from the Rosarium Philosophorum that Jung wrote a commentary on. And I've talked about what really got this all started was thinking about the masculine solar principle invading the receptive lunar principle of the moon. Well, we see that in these diagrams of the dual-headed hermaphrodite, the merger of the red king with the white queen, right? In these alchemical texts, it's a symbol for the integration of the opposites. And what I've learned in the process of digging into the meaning of the double eagle is that the double eagle itself is just another way to express this integration of opposites. So now that we can kind of see that there is an exchange between that imagery and this imagery, and going from what we've talked, our investigations into moon trees and the tree of life and the Ouroboros and the fertilization of the self as we ascend into heaven, we can see from other alchemical transcripts and other alchemical diagrams, like on the right here, how this all kind of starts to fit together. As a result of this research, I think we're learning how to read these diagrams. Before doing any of this, I was completely bereft of an understanding to do this, but I think we're getting closer and closer to this. And I do not think this is like, so yeah, maybe there is like a Masonic element to this, but I think there's also an alchemical element to this that is beyond whatever the Masonic one is signaling, that perhaps is deposited there by the universe itself. And then further, there's like all this other historical like significance that's attached to it. For instance, the double eagle was a symbol of Byzantium, which was like the Eastern Roman Empire for a very long period of time. And I wonder if that would somehow be relevant to the directionality of these other craters, such as like Little West and West, right? So you'd have like the Eastern double eagle to, and then Little West and West. I wonder if there's something there about church order and empire that is being communicated to us. I don't know how all these pieces fit together, but I find it interesting that a symbol that was associated with Byzantium is also connected with the West here on the moon. So those are some of the things I wanted to share with that.
This is great. I mean,
Yeah, isn't it
this
wild?
this double eagle thing is great, man. I really enjoy it.
You like that?
Yeah,
I
I love that.
yeah, I like it a lot too. I mean, I have to say, like the moon trees, the double eagle stuff, like I feel like as I put together materials for my book, if I was like to make the case that there truly was alchemy going on in these events, like I feel like these would be some of the stronger pieces of evidence that I could present.
Yeah, I mean, even that example of Macron planting a tree in the White House.
Yeah.
That is a very strong example. I I don't know. Just on the first sight, I was thinking, why is Little West not fitting in? Then I thought, okay, LW, if I can twist it, turn it, it's M7. Was it Matthew 7? I'm thinking about that.
Mm.
Maybe if they're doing Freemasonry, there's going to be some Christianity involved. So I'm trying to shoehorn that in. But I don't know. It could be something like Little Havana or something like that. Like New York is not a city, but like it's based on the city called York. So it's like could be something like that. Oh, what's that photograph below? Is it Buzz Aldrin?
That's Buzz Aldrin presenting the Masonic flag. If you zoom in on it, Jordan, if you want to zoom in on it, perhaps
Yeah,
the
give
the
me a
double
second.
the double eagle is not like incredibly visible here, but it's the Masonic flag that Buzz like took with him in his spacesuit to the moon, and he's here presenting it to a leader within Freemasonry after he got back from the moon. Yeah, I could have portrayed this better.
Supreme Council
Yeah, you
33
see it right
7
there.
jurisdiction. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Double eagle.
the double
I mean,
the double eagle also means like a merger of heaven and earth too. So it's fitting and appropriate that earth and heaven are unified in this event as well. So that's another meaning of it too. And what it does,
it's
if this is alchemy, it really says that there is either the universe, men, or the universe through men are engaged now in an alchemical process with the moon in order to transform the consciousness of humanity. And I really think that all this is going to come down to, I think this is all going to come down to the Philosopher's Stone. I really do. And I don't really have a great understanding of it, but I think that's really what this whole moon landing thing is all about. It's about the Philosopher's Stone. And Jung writes extensively about that. He talks about how really the Bible is about this in some ways when Jesus talks about the stone that the builders rejected. And also, yeah, here with the double eagle, you see that crown is to symbolize enlightenment, right? So there's a lot more to break down about it, but ultimately, I think whatever's going on here is about the supposed enlightenment of humanity.
yeah. I mean, Jordan talked about, like ushering something in, ushering us through a certain, on a new timeline or a new world. So it could be also
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. I'm
I
glad you like
think
that.
they're trying.
I mean, I looked at these maps forever, and I was like double, 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 and I was like double, and I just read it, double eagle, and I was like, and I had like such a sinking feeling in my stomach when I put it together. I was like, oh my gosh, how did I miss this? No,
I haven't heard anyone else put it together, so
no,
not with a crater.
yeah,
Of course, people have commented on the flag itself
yeah, yeah.
being taken.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you have the
should.
33 stars at the bottom, the triangle
Mhm.
at the top. Maybe the number of feathers is significant. I'm not
Oh yeah,
sure.
it certainly is. The star, everything is significant. It's all significant.
Yeah.
We can get into it one day, but I'm happy with it as it is right now. I got 3 more slides. Let's go to 397. So this was interesting. I've been listening to Jung's Aeon, and it perhaps got me thinking a little bit differently about the Gemini program. This is an excerpt from it. Jordan, would you mind reading this?
Sure. The year 531 is characterized astronomically by a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Gemini. This sign stands for a pair of brothers, and they too have a somewhat antithetical nature. The Greeks interpreted them as the Dioscuri, boys of Zeus, the sons of Leda, who were begotten by the swan and hatched out of an egg. Pollux is immortal, but Castor shared the human lot. Another interpretation takes them as representing Apollo and Hercules, or Apollo and Dionysus. Both interpretations suggest a certain polarity. Astronomically, at any rate, the air sign Gemini stands in a quartile, and therefore unfavorable aspect to the conjunction that took place in the year 7 BC. The inner polarity of Gemini may perhaps shed light on the prophecy about the war of Tannanim, which Rashi interprets as fishes. From the dating of Christ's birth, it would appear, as said, that the sun was in Gemini. The motif of the brothers is found very early in connection with Christ. For instance, among the Jewish Christians and Ebionites. A on page 81.
Yeah, so there were a couple things that jumped out at me about this. So I had automatically assumed that this was just Castor and Pollux, but the fact that there are other traditions where the Gemini twins could be Apollo and Heracles, but also Apollo and Dionysus. And again, that seems really important given the connections we've been observing between Nietzsche, the moon landing, Woodstock, and the previously mentioned Ayn Rand. The other things that were important to me in this, um, and I've got to dig deeper into it, but the importance of Saturn and Jupiter conjunctions uh, perhaps explains some of the Saturnian and Jovian elements that we've seen merged together. And I've got the last slide that we look at. I've actually got something on this. For instance, like where we had the Saturn V rocket carrying the golden Apollo Eagle to the moon. So I wonder if something about Jung's conjunction, what he says about conjunctions, is applicable to this. And then also we're going to get into conversations about the Jungian view of eschatons and how that figures into this transition, this ushering in, going from Pisces to Aquarius, and perhaps going from the Christ period to the Antichrist period, and what exactly is happening here with this type of consciousness that we're looking at. And then lastly, um, I just the observation about the numinosity of the number 11, it seems to maybe also have been present in the Gemini program, because when you look at the Gemini symbol, it too can look like an 11. So I think it's just another documentation of the presence of the 11 in all of this, and then we get deeper into what the 11 may mean, right, as this disruption of completion of 10, it being a master number, and the two pillars being some perhaps relevant to this integration of opposites that we keep talking about. So, which would kind of fit a little bit better if the twins were considered to be Apollo and Dionysus, although I've already talked about the mortality and the immortality of Castor and Pollux. So just another little layer to this. This isn't groundbreaking, but it's something. And perhaps, I mean, maybe we should just skip to slide 399 since I'm already on it. And we can close out with 398. I did just like bring up a few quotes about how Jung talks about these Saturn and Jupiter conjunctions. And this is an image from Apollo 12 where the Saturn rocket gets struck with the lightning bolt. And it's a very profound moment where these symbols of Titans are coming into conjunction with one another. And, I'll just read this from Liber Novus. Jung notes that around 7 BC, there was a conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter representing a union of extreme opposites, which would place the birth of Christ under Pisces. Pisces, Latin for fishes, is known as the sign of the fish and is often represented by two fish swimming in opposite directions. So we have the opposites here. Jung stated, and then again in an interview, Jung stated that at the birth of Christ, Saturn, the maleficent god, and Jupiter, the beneficent god, were so near to each other that they were almost one star. That is, the star of Bethlehem, when the new self, Christ, good and evil, was born. And in a way, kind of when these rockets take off and they have this Jovian and Saturnian elements, they kind of do look like a new star merged together in the sky. And I guess the reason why I started to think about this a little bit more is after we talked about Levi Shoemaker 9 and it's slamming into Jupiter during the 25th anniversary of the moon landing. I thought to myself, well, is this a continuation of this Battle of the Titans theme that we picked up on? I don't know, however long ago. It seems like kind of a return blow that has been given to Jupiter after Saturn was cast down. But also maybe it's just emphasizing the union of these two archetypal patterns together. So I thought that was interesting. And are these groundbreaking? No, but I think it's just, these are just like, for the book I'm working on, these are kind of just points of construction, points of organization for when I do write more seriously.
Yeah, this is beautiful. I think
You like
it
that?
looks great. Yeah. I mean, e- we talked about, needles earlier in the episodes, and you can even see the striking resemblance of needles and rockets. So,
No,
all these
yeah.
things, they're in they seem to be in the same league, or like, so it's pretty interesting.
I have a bunch of
Are you-
slides on that because like whatever they did with the vaccine program, they were always harkening back to the space program. So like the Russian version of the vaccine was called Sputnik, and we had Project Warp Speed, which is a reference to Star Trek, which is a reference to which was part of the propaganda, good or bad,
yeah,
or the Apollo program, and there was another one, but yeah, it's all, for whatever reason they made a big effort to associate it with the Apollo missions or the space race in general, the vaccine race.
yeah. This is like groundbreaking. You talk about something being groundbreaking. This is groundbreaking. I mean, in my books, it is. It's like completely they're trying to align themselves with this thing, because space program itself is such a huge undertaking, huge governmental undertaking. You're allocating so much public resources towards this, and then if it turns out to be something that it's not, and then aligning this particular event also, and thinking that, okay, you trusted us then, please trust us now again, it's
Yeah,
it's it's, it's like it's pretty insane that they would do that. Maybe they even found the resemblance pretty uncanny, so they decided to go along with it. But like, if it's being done intentionally, or even like they're aligning themselves with archetypes, it's pretty spot on to have figured this out. Like, I wouldn't have figured this out on my own. I would have died maybe in 2067. Nobody would have known. you know, this
yeah.
is
I
this is
don't know
interesting.
how much. I mean, I have slides that I'm working on that. I mean, we can go ahead if you want. Slide, Jordan, you want to go to slide 408? I've been talking about getting around to this forever, but I can give a little sneak peek here. I saw this as it happened right there. So
Oh
I saw this
God.
as it happened. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson, like went on Colbert wearing this Saturn V rocket tie so they brought this astrophysicist on to, you know, coach people up on believing in science, especially vaccines. It's not even his area of expertise, but he presented this choice. And is it, you know, Is this subliminal? Is this intentional? Like, it's clear as day to me what the subtext is. Like you said, like, you believed us for this, we did this excellently, now we're gonna do it again. And I just got started to think about, like, even like the moon lander and stuff. Like, I've thought about this since I was like a teenager, like how much they look like the depictions of viruses. And so what is happening here? Like, why is this happening? And I don't think it's so similar. I don't think it's so simple where it's just like, hey, we got this right, so we got this right. You love you love the prequel, you're gonna love the sequel. Like, how are these things connected? And I don't know if I know, but I think it has something to do with Ovid's The Metamorphosis and Jungian archetypes. But I'm just acknowledging that this is happening. And what do you think when
Yeah,
you see this, Ostic?
well, I mean, now my reality is becoming even more magical than it already was. Now it's
Yeah.
like why it's happening. Yeah, it's
I,
this is good stuff.
I
This
love this
connection
quote
is
from
just
Jung. I have this quote from Jung here. The archetype is living matter. It never decays. I feel like this is just, I don't know if Neil deGrasse Tyson has any idea what he's doing when it comes to how he dressed to talk about vaccines and the response to the coronavirus. I think this is just like the unus mundus, the universe. It's like, hey, I need symbols. And it's like operating through Neil deGrasse Tyson being like, wear that tie tonight. I
yeah.
don't really think he thought about it like that. I don't think there's a conspiracy here. I think God or the universe chose that tie for him.
Or maybe he's in, yeah, I mean, God, like the way he's living his life, all those decisions have led him to like choose this tie maybe during that time. It's not like, like God, even God is not being intentional about it. It's like this whole system of networks he's surrounded in, like he's with these science people and they're talking about it and it's suddenly manifesting itself in him. Like God is doing that. He's not being intentional, but it's like his own religion, his own private religion with his friends and all these colleagues. And because I think in America there's a huge pushback against like anti-science people. People will try to act smart about uh, ninth grade scientific experiments on Twitter, and then get put down
Yeah.
by Norm Macdonald or things like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, this is some very creepy and beautiful at the same time, I should say.
This is what my life is like every day, Ostic. This is how I see the world. And you might be catching my psychosis, so be careful.
No, no, no. I can handle that, I think, because I don't think too far. I'm only interested in the present, so I think I would have no harm if I even catch this psychosis.
Yeah. Well, I've got one last slide to talk about, unless Jordan wants to weigh in on this stuff.
No, I mean, it's the same conversation. Is it working through him? Is it like Ostic said, like just almost I see like this mycelium network, like it's just like popping up,
Mm-hmm. Well,
What is it?
that feeds well into the final slide. So if you can go back to that one where with the Chat GPT image, where is it? Slide 398. So there is so much to say about this, but I just kind of wanted to like give a Jordan so effectively recapitulated the viewpoint. She's got a way of words when describing like my evolving theory on how this all works. You used the word tapestry, and I was like, man, she did such a great job communicating that. I was like, I need like a visual aid for what I'm seeing here. So it seems like to me there's like at least three tiers. We have history and science as is presented to us, and then what is happening right now through the democratization of the internet and the decentralization of information is that all this conspiracy theory stuff is coming out, and that's usually where the conversation ends, right? Is people go, oh, this this was the United States, trying to do a propaganda war. They point the finger at different shadowy groups like Nazis or whatever else, right? And it's all, and then like where I find myself is I find myself observing a panentheistic alchemical process is what I'm calling it. I'm saying that God is working through, or the Unus Mundus is working through all these different symbols and utilizing whatever it can. And it's not just like that there is this going deeper and deeper and deeper into it, that it might actually be the case that we are witnessing like some sort of dialectical unfolding, that the normie perspective and the darker shadowy perspective are kind of like the Jungian opposites of the light and the dark, that are like moving forward a larger disclosure of the universe itself to the inhabitants of it, right? So it's almost Hegelian in that way, right? Like we're ultimately, it is using conspiracy to give birth to a, a, a greater totalization of itself. Do you see what I'm saying? And I've got a list of works here that I think are that potentially touch on this in some way. Obviously the stuff that we've looked at with Jung, I think the Mysterium Conjunctionis is going to be important for that. Baudrillard's takes on simulacra and simulation, but even things that like Philip K. Dick wrote about in Valis, James Hillman, Wolfgang Geigerich, and of course the Hermetic and alchemical tradition. But I think this is the way I want to start talking about it, is that it's not just tears. They are tears that are dynamic and working off of one another in some way. So I don't have a deeper thing to communicate than that, but I feel like that's pretty deep.
I like that you kind of organized it. We have been saying this over and over and over. So I like that you kind of tied it together.
Yeah. I mean, this is not final. This is just
Sure.
my evolving view. What do you think,
I
Austin?
mean, yeah, this idea, it's, I think if it's resonating with so many people, there must be some truth to that. I mean, it could be a truth about God itself, or it could be a truth about our own consciousness, how we perceive the world. This is like a bottleneck on our world, that we need this kind of a story, that there's something hidden behind everything else. Yeah, there's this is interesting for me. I'm like
No.
I'm basically reading all these names. Okay, these are the books that are in my pipeline. Okay, I've always thought about Philip K. Dick, but I never got to him. Maybe I will.
Well,
Because
that kind of circles back around. One of the movies we thought about talking about is The Waking Life, and there's a very important scene that's devoted to his book, "Flow My Tears," the policeman said. So that might be a nudge to do that film soon if we
if
discuss it.
you are interested in Linklater, I think Linklater also made a movie about Apollo mission, about how,
Apollo 10 and a half, and it's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and you know what? I think Linklater knows all this. I mean, just watch. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? Like the way he talks and what he names his characters and stuff like that. Like, I think he knows all about it. So,
Yeah, he's very unassuming, but he's like very smart.
oh yeah, he's very smart. All right. Well, I think we've gone for 2.5 hours. I think we've done
I
it,
mean, next
gang.
time you should lead with this material first. I think this needs a bit more, gusto and enthusiasm.
All right, all right, all right, all right.
Yeah,
I can.
Do we start with the Golden Bough? Do we start with the schizo stuff?
Well, last time I
yeah.
led with all the schizo stuff, and I don't know. I mean, I do this. I spent a lot of my life like trying to like convince people that I was doing cool things with like music or ed tech or whatever. Like I do these things now, like the right people will show up And yeah, maybe I do need to front load it a little bit more with this. We'll see. It's a titration. It's a ratio you kind of have to eyeball. So we'll see.
Yeah,
I'm already, as I'm
you
saying it out loud, I want to like look at like Hegelian, because there's a lot of like Hegelian diagrams for how thesis, antithesis, and synthesis work. So maybe that's what we're looking at. So there you go.
I mean, can I go?
Yeah,
Sounds
no,
good. I
I
think
gotta
that's a
make
wrap.
dinner. Yeah. All
Yeah,
right. See you
Thanks,
guys
yeah.
later.
guys.
Thanks for
All
the
right.
presentation. Thanks for inviting me. Actually, I'm like it's like being on the front seat of something like very unique happening. Like I don't say this enough. I should say it, but like it's like the one part of my week is like, wow, there's something unique happened. There's something
Aw.
new is gonna happen here. So I'm very
Well, I
excited for it
try.
every. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I try very hard every day to make these discoveries for you guys. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, appreciate you too.
All right. All right. Talk to you later.